Welcome to episode 62 of the Back Deck Bible Study. I'm your host, Steve Davis. This is also episode 6 in our series, God in a Minor Key, and we're looking at the minor prophets. And since this is basically the halfway point of the series, I'd love to get some feedback. Are you enjoying it? Is there something you like that I'm not talking about? Some ways to make it better. You can email me, steve@spousesprings.org, or if you want to comment on wherever you're receiving this, wherever you're watching or listening, there should be a way for you to comment there. So if you just want to comment, I'd love to get it so we can continue the series and make it as good as possible. Today at the halfway point, we're hitting the prophet Micah. And Micah might be, if Jonah was the oddest of the prophets, Jonah could well be the most normal. He very easily, I would say, he could be the most normal of all the prophets. For one thing, to understand how the prophetic books work, we have a pretty good picture of how Paul would write a letter or an epistle. I don't know, Paul's in jail somewhere, say, and he's writing it to the church in Rome. And so he's going to, in a very short period of time, he's going to compose the letter in his head. He's going to have someone who does the writing for him, and the two of them together, however God inspired that process, they're going to do it. It's going to be done in a very relatively short period of time, put together, and then sent to the church at Rome. And it's almost like musically, it will be producing a single. Okay, so if you got a single that you're going to release on Spotify or iTunes, and you're getting it together and you send it out, and that's a letter that Paul would write. Now, the prophetic books are very, very different than that. They are more like greatest hits albums, because normally they would be composed over the writer's lifetime. It would be taking all the different prophecies that had been written down by this person. Say if you're like Jeremiah spent an entire lifetime as a prophet, and he prophesied frequently, and there were people who wrote down his prophecies, and then either he or like Baruch, who was right there with him, would then compile that into the book. Matter of fact, the book of Jeremiah isn't even chronological. I mean, it's a greatest hits album, and they don't say, okay, this is from the first album, this is from the second album, this is from the last album. No, you can tell there are places where this was written well before the thing that came before it. And that's very normal in these. And it's normal in Isaiah. Isaiah is similar. And Micah is that way. Micah is not him sitting down and writing this book. It's compilation of his career as a prophet. And one of the things that you'll see, we talk about it being normal, one of the things you'll see in almost every regular prophet is you're going to have two different types of oracles, two different types of sermons, as it were. There are the oracles of doom and the oracles of hope. And the oracles of doom are everything's going bad, and we saw in Joel how the locusts were coming, and they're going to be followed by real armies, and everything's going to die. But at the end of the book, usually there would be an oracle or two of hope. Well, when they're compiling the book of Micah, when Micah's putting it all together, he doesn't go gloom, hope. He goes doom, hope, doom, hope, doom, hope. Like about 3 times, he goes through the process of having, oh my gosh, things are going to get really bad. And then here's the good news. And so it's a constant rotation for Micah between the good news and the bad news. Here's the good news, here's the bad news, constant. And he starts, we're just going to hit a few things in Micah. We're not going to dig into everything. Of course, we don't have time. I've done an entire sermon series on the book of Micah. It's one of my favorite prophets. And we'll see that it starts out, the word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moresheth. Let me show you that in the very beginning of the book, there's an incredible opening to sort of get you going in the right direction. It says, the word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moresheth, and that's the city he's from, in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. And we've talked about it a little bit. We're trying to do this as much as possible chronologically, going through the prophets, so you can put them in their historical spot and they make more sense. And so Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, these guys had long reigns. They were kings combined for an extremely long period of time. And Micah was a prophet during that time frame. Like I said, it's his greatest hits album. It's not a one-hit wonder. This is his greatest hits album during this long reign when there was mixed bag, but there was a fair amount of prosperity during this time, financially, but spiritually, there were a lot of dry times. Hezekiah was kind of the reverse. He was very much a spiritual high time. And so here's the image that he gives you to start the book in verse 2. He says, "Hear you peoples, all of you. Pay attention, all earth, and all that is in it. And let the Lord God be a witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple." So we've got this image of not the temple on earth, not the one in Jerusalem, but something bigger, the original, the real holy temple, as it were. And listen to this. "For behold, the Lord is coming out of his place, and will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth, and the mountains will melt under him, and the valleys will split open like wax before the fire, like waters poured down a steep place." So you've got a picture. The way I see it when I read this is I see it's like a giant, a God giant stepping out of his holy temple, and the mountains are melting under him as he strides in judgment. This is a really powerful picture of God on a judgment quest, and he is coming to judge the people of Judah for their sins. It says in verse 5, "For this is all all this is for the transgression of Jacob, and for the sins of the house of Israel. What is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? And what is the high place of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem?" In other words, you've turned your capital cities, Samaria and Jerusalem, into the centerpieces for transgression, not the centerpieces of worship. They're the centerpieces of transgression. "Therefore, I will make Samaria," and Samaria is the northern kingdom. "I will make Samaria a heap in the open country, a place for planting vineyards, and I will pour down her stones into the valley and uncover her foundations." I'm going to flatten this place. And that's what he's going to go through this first thing, is he's going to talk about Jerusalem and Samaria. Jerusalem, the southern kingdom, Judah, King David, his descendants. Samaria, the northern kingdom, the ones who rejected Davidic kingdom. And it's going to be a lot of that, of him coming down on those people very hard. Now, this is I think kind of interesting. Hopefully you do too. You're listening. One of the things we've talked about a little bit is a lot of times as you're reading it, you'll hit these place names and you're trying to figure out, oh, where is that? I never heard of this place. I don't know what it means. And it can confuse us. We're reading and we're thinking, well, I should know where that is. And if I don't know where that is, then I'm not getting everything I can get out of this book. I mean, I should know all this stuff. And there's so much to know and I don't know it. And it discourages us from reading the minor prophets because there's all these mentions of all these places that we've never heard of. Well, listen to this. This is so cool. I just pulled this right out of one of the commentaries I looked at for this book, for the book of Micah, because what's going to follow is he's going to have a list of places with a judgment, a little mini judgment, like one line on each place. And here's what's interesting. Let me just read. One of the first ones mentioned is Beth Lifra. And here's what the commentary says. "It is a village or town of unknown origin." I don't know where this commentary, the guy who's paid to write a book on the book of Micah, says about this town, one of the first ones mentioned, we don't know where it's at. Then we go to the next place, Shafir, and he says, a village or town of unknown origin. Then he goes to Za'anan, and he says, ready for this? A village of unknown origin or location. Okay? Beth Ezel, a village of unknown location. Marath, a village of unknown location. I did not move those around. There are 6 towns in this first setting, and the first 5, he says, we don't know where they are. We know nothing about these 5 towns. And when you go to the next section, there's a list of 5 and then a list of 6. A list of 6 towns with a little saying, and then a list of 5 towns with a little saying. And 5 of the first 6 we don't know, and we don't know a whole lot more about the next set. Okay? So here's I find that very fascinating. The one town, I want to give you this town because this city's really important, and it's one that we don't talk about. It doesn't get mentioned as much in the Bible, but it was a very crucial city, and it would show up from time to time. And that's Lachish. Lachish is the next town that's mentioned. And it's in the south. It's a former Canaanite city-state. And it was prominent during Joshua's time. And what happened was it became, under Solomon, a chariot city. And a chariot city, we don't really get that because we don't get this is where they kept the tanks. Okay, this is where the military, the cavalry, which came not just on horses, but on chariots. It was a chariot city from all the way back in Solomon's time and was a fortress. Okay. And it was on the main route from the coast to the Hebron Hills, to the hills in the middle, more middle part of Judah. And so it's a huge, important city. So we know where it was and we know what it was. So anytime you see Lachish, think about it. It was a chariot city. It's where they housed a lot of their defenses and where a lot of the fortresses were. If you could take out Lachish, which like Nebuchadnezzar does eventually, it was a big deal. So that's the one that we know. So we've got all these towns, we don't know what they are, and you're going, well, okay, why do we have these 6 towns that we don't know where they are? Why did they bring them up? Well, what he's doing, and this is I think this is at least cute, is they're all puns. And as someone who is a big fan of puns, this makes my heart warm to know that God is using puns to get across his point. If we go through the first actual town named is Gath, we kind of have an idea about Gath. That's where Goliath was from. And the sound would be Got. And it sounds like the word Tag, which is in Hebrew is tell. If you look at how he describes it, it's a pun. The next Beth Ophrah is house of dust. And then what he says is you will roll in the dust. The next town, Shafir, means pleasant or beautiful. And what he says, there's going to be nakedness and shame about you. The next town, Zaanan, sounds like to come or go out. But it says you're not going to come out. You're going to you're stuck. Beth Ezel is the house of taking away. And what he says is, and God's going to take away your protection. And Marath, which reminds me of Ruth, by the way. Mara in the book of Ruth says her name is bitter. And Marath means bitter. And then he flips it to the word good. And so all the first 6 cities it's a pun. But as you read it, you get the idea bad stuff's about to happen. So you can read it at multiple levels. One level, like for you and me, because I'm not going to look all these up every time I'm reading the Bible. When I'm reading the minor prophets, I'm not going to stop very often, if ever, and look up each town. It's just too much work, and you can't really get the flow of the book if you're stopping every 3 words to see, okay, Shafir, what is that? And so, but if you don't have any background, what you see is here's all these towns, and here are all the bad things that are going to happen because God's judging them because they're living outside of his standards and because they're worshiping idols and rejecting God. So I don't need to know a whole lot more about it to really get the point. If I happen to look it up, I can get those puns and go, oh, that's a really interesting way to express that. I think that's really cool how Micah goes through and puts in all these puns. But still, the point in general, which you'll get even if you know none of these, even if you didn't know Gath and don't know Lachish, you still get the point. There is national judgment coming, and that's the point. Okay. A lot of times when you're reading these, don't let those names throw you. Don't let the fact that you don't know all the details for these stories throw you. As we saw here, the best commentators don't know the details. It was like he went around his area where he lived. It looks like most of them are in one region, at least in that first 6, except maybe for Gath. They're in one region. And he picked them not because they were special cities, but because their names sounded like something else that he could do a literary twist with and express a pun. I love that. Love that a lot. But you'll get that just reading it. You don't have to go, I don't know what that means. I don't get the pun. Judgment is coming. We saw, and that's how the book started. God's coming out of his temple. He's coming with bad stuff on his head. He's coming to do damage, to bring judgment. And that's what you see. Okay, so that's what we get. Now, what I want to do for the rest of the time is not go through the whole book, but Micah is an amazing one of my favorites. I think I already said that, of the minor prophets. And there are 2 little pieces. One's just half a verse, and one is 2 or 3 verses that I found just really awesome. One of them is I have journaled. I talk sometimes about journaling. Journaling is where I read the Bible, and I'm reading it for letting God speak to me, and I'm just going in and asking, okay, God, what does the text say? What does it mean? And then what does it mean to me? And I've journaled through Micah a number of times, either just taking the entire book and going through it one section at a time, taking a week or 3, to go through the book of Micah. And I've had other times where I'm reading larger sections, but I'm reading Micah as part of my larger reading plan, and I'm still journaling. I'm stopping and writing down what I get. And so I keep all of it in a thing called Evernote, which is an online app that allows me to organize all these things as I go through that. And I've been doing it for quite a few years. And a few years back, I was going to do a series or something on Micah. And I'm going through all my journal entries on Micah. And I found out there was one verse that I had journaled at least 4 times. I didn't remember it from one to the next. I would go through Micah, I would journal this verse, and then I would go on, and the next time I go through Jonah, I'd come to that verse and go, oh yeah, that's a great verse. I should journal it. And I journaled it 4 times at least. I've done this verse, that this verse has snuck up on me. I'm afraid now it's not going to sneak up on me anymore because I noticed that I've done it. But it's the second half of Micah chapter 4, verse 10. And it's talking about the exile that's coming. The nation of Judah has been betraying God. They've been living against God, and God's going to punish them by sending them to the nation of Babylon, the Chaldean nation, which is in the Iran-Iraq region, depending on how you place things. Iraq primarily. They're going to move them there, and they're going to be in exile. And here's what the verse says, which is, I love it. It says, you will go to Babylon in exile. There you will be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you out of the hand of your enemies. So isn't that wild? God's going to rescue them by exiling them. Their exile will be their rescue. Okay? The Lord's going to redeem them out of the hand of the enemies by turning them over to the hand of the enemies. My journal entry, one of the times, like I said, 4 times, here's one of my journal entries, just so you get a perspective, just so you hear one of them. The path to redemption and restoration isn't always the easy path. Matter of fact, it's often the most difficult. For Israel, for Judah, the path led through Babylon, and then only after a period of writhing and agony, which is how it's described. So when times seem their roughest, don't assume it's a punishment or even just a training. It may be the path God has for you for your restoration and your healing. And I think that's just an incredible truth for us to get, is a lot of times the bad path that seems we're on a bad path and we think, are we being judged for it? No, sometimes it is the path God is giving us to get us to the better thing. And I think that I found that one fascinating. So I love that. I also love Micah 6. Now, Micah 6, this is the gold standard in the prophets for expressing the truth it expresses. It's obviously the gold standard in the book of Micah. And it's the one that if you've read the book of Micah, this is where you stop and go, oh, write this one down. This is awesome. Micah 6, I'm going to start and just read verses 6 through 8, give you the whole, more of the context for it. I've got the key part of this. I've got it on a t-shirt. I mean, this is something. Micah 6 through 8 says, with what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? So when I come to God, what should I bring? What's the right thing for me to present to God as an offering? So shall I come before him burnt offerings with calves a year old, which is your normal stuff? Should I bring normal offerings to him? But then he goes to like an extreme level. In verse 7, will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams? Thousands of rams. A normal person, okay? I have to kind of speculate this, is going to give 1, 2, maybe 3 rams a year for their entire adult life, which let's say they live to their 70s. So they give 50 times 3. 3 times 50 is 150 rams. That would be a reasonable number for an individual. That'd be a high number, I think, for an individual to give. But it says, will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams? If I just got every ram in this community and took it to God as a sacrifice, will he be pleased with that? Will he be pleased with 10,000 rivers of olive oil? More olive oil than we can imagine. Would that make God happy? If I were to come to him with thousands of rams and 10,000 rivers of olive oil. And then he goes to an extreme where he goes completely outside of the Judeo and Christian view. Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Shall I go clear off the books to something that only the false gods did, which is require the sacrifice of a child? Should I sacrifice? Would God be happy with basic offerings? Would God be happy if I bring him offerings beyond my imagination. Would God be happy if I gave him my child? And that leads us into the perspective, because he says, no, that's not it. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you. You know what the right answer is. And it's not how many sacrifices you can give. It's not thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of olive oil. It's not my own child. That's not what God wants. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you. And it's a real simple little sentence, which you've probably heard before: to act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. God would rather see that in my life than enormous sacrifice, than enormous worship even. I mean, because their sacrifice was part of their worship system. It was the biggest part of their worship. Worship was sacrificing animals to God. That was a huge part of their worship. So does God want the most amazing amount of worship you can possibly give him? No. Does God want me to sacrifice beyond comprehension? No. What's he want? Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Let me just act justly. Justice means righteousness. Do what's right. I'm going to sum this up in really simple terms for you. Okay, act justly means do what's right. What does God want for you? He wants you to do what's right. He wants you to live his principles. Do the right thing. Okay? Then he says, love mercy. Mercy means showing people. Okay, I say this once in a while. Grace is when you get what you don't deserve, and you deserve bad, you get good instead. Mercy is where you really deserve bad and don't get it. Okay, so love mercy, which means treat others better than they deserve. When somebody does something and they deserve judgment, you should judge them. You should be mad at them. They deserve. Mercy means I earned a bad thing and I don't get it. Grace, in a sense, grace is a bigger picture than that. Grace means I don't deserve a good thing and I get it anyway. Okay, to get that. Mercy, I deserve a bad thing and I don't get it. Grace, I don't deserve a good thing and I get it anyway. God's always doing both of those for us, grace and mercy. And this is the mercy aspect of it. And it's love mercy isn't about mercy for me. It means I'm taking mercy and I'm giving it to others. So do what's right, act justly, and treat others better than they deserve, which is to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God, which is being humble. And I share frequently the things that are bothering me, because why not? It's my podcast. I want to tell you what's bothering me. I can't. No, seriously. What bothers me most is when I look out on America and the church in America, because I have a love-hate relationship with the church in America. I really want God to do amazing things through the church in America, in the church in America, and I see the church in America just go in the opposite direction so much. And I look at things like this, do what's right, treat others better than they deserve, and be humble. And I look at how Christians act in our culture, and that ain't it. I look at the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. And that doesn't seem to be how Christians think they're supposed to act now. The greatest thing, love is patient, love is kind, love is gentle. Wow. And these are foundational bedrock issues. I mean, back here in Micah, he's saying, this is the foundation. This is the foundation of good religion. Do what's right, treat others better than they deserve, and be humble. That's the foundation of faith. That's what it's supposed to, when you have faith in Christ, that's what it's supposed to look like when you live it out. The fruit of the Spirit, when you live out God in you, when God is manifesting himself in you, when you're cultivating the right things so that God can, the fruit of the Spirit's love, joy, peace, patience. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not self-serving. And I'm like, wow. Honestly, it's no wonder so many people in America don't have any desire to know more or to be Christians, because when I look at how the Christians act, it is so opposite. I got to watch it in me, because all of us are sinners. All of us can fail. I need to project that I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to treat others better than they deserve, and I'm going to be humble. And I think if we as the church could start living that, which is both the Old Testament and the New Testament both speak the same language about this is important. Jesus put it, do to others as you would have them treat others the way you'd like for them to treat you. If we would stop being mean and start being Christ-like and Micah-like, I think we do a lot better job reaching people for Jesus. And that's today's rant. And I don't know, I'm angry and hurt at the same time about just how much these foundational principles that God makes clear over and over and over don't seem to be what we value in the church in America. And it's definitely not what we express as the church in America so much. Anyway, that was free. The Back Deck Bible Study is a ministry of Spout Springs Church, the church that I pastor. If you want to know more about the church, you can check it out at spoutsprings.org. If you want to know more about me and my stuff, it's at stuffstevesays.com. That theme song, by the way, is called Born Twice. It's got by a guy named Mark Tracy. I really don't know if there's a spiritual significance to the title, but I came across the song when I was looking for a theme song, and I don't know if it has any meaning to the artist, but I like it, and I like the tune, so I made it the theme song for a lot of the stuff I use. Again, it's Born Twice by Mark Tracy. Check out more of his stuff online. And you guys, have a great day.